She asked, "Do you even like women with baggage?" I said, "I'm only here for yours." The first time I saw her, it was broad daylight, the kind of afternoon where the sun feels honest and unforgiving, exposing everything you try to hide. She was sitting alone on a long wooden bench outside the city courthouse, shoulders slightly hunched, hands wrapped around a paper cup that had gone cold. There was nothing dramatic about her appearance, no tears streaming down her face, no loud breakdown that demanded attention. What made it impossible to look away was the weight she carried in her stillness, as if the air around her was heavier than everywhere else. I didn't know her name yet, didn't know her story, but something in me recognized that look immediately. It was the look of someone who had survived things no one claps for, who had learned to stay quiet because noise never saved her before. Before the story pulls you any deeper, take a second. If you believe kindness can change lives, if you believe people deserve second chances no matter how heavy their past feels, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this only matter if they reach hearts willing to listen. Her name was Mirella, and the day I met her was the day she was officially free and still completely trapped. Free from paperwork, from signatures, from a chapter the system considered closed, yet trapped in the invisible aftermath that follows you long after the door shuts behind you. I was there for a completely different reason, a freelance photographer hired to document a community outreach event across the street, one of those feel-good programs no one stays for once the cameras are gone. I should have walked past her like everyone else did. I should have focused on my job, my deadlines, my neatly organized life that made sense on paper. Instead, I sat down at the other end of the bench, pretending to check my phone while silently wondering how a stranger could look so familiar. The afternoon stretched lazily, traffic humming, people moving with purpose, laughter spilling out of a nearby cafe. Mirella stayed where she was, barely shifting, as if moving would make everything she was holding inside spill out. She had a small overnight bag at her feet, the kind that suggests someone learned long ago not to own too much. I noticed the scuff marks on her shoes, the faint bruise on her wrist she hadn't bothered to cover, the way she flinched when a loud voice echoed from the courthouse steps. These weren't details you notice unless you've learned to read pain quietly. When she finally stood up, the sun caught her face fully, and I saw it then, not sadness exactly, but exhaustion layered over resilience. She walked toward the bus stop, hesitating like she wasn't sure where she was allowed to go next. Without thinking, I followed, not close enough to scare her, just enough to be present. The bus arrived late, as buses always do when someone's life feels like it's hanging in the balance. When it did, she didn't get on. Neither did I. We ended up walking in the same direction, parallel paths that kept narrowing until coincidence felt like intention. By the time we reached the park a few blocks away, the daylight had softened, the sun filtering through trees like it was trying to be gentle. We sat on opposite ends of a stone ledge near a fountain, the city noise fading into something almost peaceful. It was there, in the most ordinary setting, that her question came, not spoken aloud in sharp words but carried in the way she looked at me, wary and curious, like she was bracing for rejection before it could surprise her. It was the kind of question people with heavy pasts ask without moving their lips, the one that says, "Do you even like women with baggage, or are you just passing time until someone easier comes along?" I didn't answer with charm or cleverness. I answered by staying. By not checking my watch. By listening when she began to talk in fragments, offering pieces of her life like fragile objects she wasn't sure I'd handle gently. She spoke about starting over too many times to count, about mistakes that weren't always hers but somehow became her responsibility anyway. She talked about loving the wrong people, about trusting promises that dissolved under pressure, about learning to pack fast and leave quietly. There were long pauses where she stared at the fountain, and I let the silence exist without trying to fix it. My own life, by contrast, had been carefully curated to avoid mess. I had moved cities whenever things got complicated, ended relationships the moment they required more than comfort. I told myself I valued peace, but sitting there with Mirella, I realized I had been avoiding depth. Her presence cracked something open in me, something I hadn't known was sealed shut. For the first time in years, I felt fully awake, not because things were exciting, but because they were real. Over the next few weeks, our paths crossed deliberately. We met in daylight only, long walks through neighborhoods that smelled like bread and rain, afternoons spent in public libraries and small diners where the waitstaff didn't rush you. Mirella insisted on daytime because nights still scared her, because darkness carried memories she wasn't ready to confront. I respected that without question. There was a gentleness in how we learned each other, like two people carefully stepping around emotional landmines, aware that one wrong move could send everything spiraling. Her baggage revealed itself slowly. There was the past relationship that had taught her fear instead of love, the legal battle that drained her savings and her spirit, the family that loved her but didn't know how to show it without judgment. Some days she was light, almost playful, laughing at small things like pigeons fighting over crumbs. Other days, she was distant, eyes clouded, words minimal. I learned not to take it personally. I learned that healing isn't linear, and loving someone with wounds means accepting detours. The challenge wasn't just her past. It was mine too. Being with Morella forced me to confront my own patterns of retreat, my tendency to disappear when things got heavy. There were moments I felt overwhelmed, moments when I wondered if I was strong enough to hold space for someone else's pain without losing myself. I struggled silently, afraid that admitting doubt would make me just another person who promised and left. One afternoon, while sitting on the steps of an old museum, she finally put the question into words, her voice steady but her hands trembling. She wondered if someone like me could really want someone like her, someone whose life came with warnings and footnotes. She didn't ask for reassurance, she asked for honesty. And in that moment, the answer was clear in a way few things ever are. I wasn't there despite her baggage. I was there because of it. Because it meant she had survived. Because it meant she knew the value of gentleness. Because her scars told a story of endurance, not damage. From that day on, something shifted. Not magically, not instantly, but perceptibly. She began to stand a little straighter. She started making plans again, small ones at first, like enrolling in a daytime art class, applying for jobs that didn't feel like punishment. I watched her rediscover parts of herself she had buried to survive, and it was one of the most humbling experiences of my life. There were setbacks. Days when old fears resurfaced. When trust felt fragile, when the future seemed too uncertain to imagine. We faced misunderstandings born from trauma, moments when she pulled away and moments when I had to resist the urge to run. The difference was that this time, we stayed. We talked things through under open skies, sitting on park benches, walking city streets flooded with sunlight, reminding each other that we were here, now, choosing each other. As months passed, the daytime world became our sanctuary. Morning coffee rituals, afternoon job interviews followed by nervous laughter, lazy weekends spent exploring places neither of us had noticed before. The more ordinary our life became, the more extraordinary it felt. Morella's baggage didn't disappear, but it became lighter, not because I carried it for her, but because she realized she didn't have to carry it alone. Near the end of this story, if you're still here, if any part of this journey feels familiar, please take a moment to like the video, share it, and comment. Your engagement tells stories like this that they matter, that vulnerability has a place in this world. There was one final moment that sealed everything for me, a simple one. We were walking through a sunlit market, the air warm, voices overlapping, life happening all around us. Morella stopped suddenly, looking at me with a softness that hadn't been there before. She didn't need to ask the question again. The answer was already living between us, in the way she trusted the day, in the way I no longer feared the weight of staying. Just before this story ends, I have a special request. Please comment below with one word that represents healing to you. Someone reading might need that word more than you realize. Loving Morella didn't fix her past, and it didn't erase mine. What it did was teach us that baggage isn't something to be ashamed of. It's proof of travel, of distance covered, of storms survived. In the clear, honest light of day, we learned that the right kind of love doesn't ask you to unpack alone. It sits beside you, opens the bag gently, and says, without fear, without hesitation, I'm only here for yours.